Welcome you all to today's lab uh, video lecture. So today we will look at how to do lab number 4 for control system. So this lab basically designed for time domain analysis that actually include analysis of the transient response characteristics of the system. So the objective basically is to make the students understand the transient response characteristics of a system. Now, first of all, let's define what is transient response. Now, look here, the part of the time response of the system before reaching a steady state value is known as transient response. The second one is the steady state response. This is the part of the response once the system has reached the steady state. Now, let's look at the graphically what this means. For example, if we give a step input to a system, dynamic system, okay, so this is the final value of this system is shown in the graph here. Now when we give the input, it took some time to reach the final value. Okay, when it reached the final value, so this means that it is in steady state. Before that part is known as the transient response. Okay, now how we define that we reach the steady state? So we have to define some limits. For example, so if this is the final value, if we are above final value 2% or below final value 2%, then we can say that we reach the steady state. So look here, this is the point. We'll draw these lines, and these lines shows that when we enter this steady state. Now this is the first part of the response. The initial one, which is known as transient, is very important. Why? When we start the system and give input, it took some time so that it reached the final value. Okay, now when it reached the final value, it do have some overshoot in some time, and then it will try to reach the steady state value. Now if we look at the transient response, so we have different ideas here. So first property here is that when we start the response, if we take the 10% when we reach the final value, for example, if final value is 10 or 1, then in case of 10 is the 10% is 1, in case of 1 is 10% is 0.1. So if we multiply 0.1 with the final value, what is the final value, doesn't matter, we get the 10% of the response that reach the steady state. Okay, now when it reached the 90% of the final value, now if we calculate the time between 10% to 90%, this time is known as rise time. Similarly, if you look at, it will cross the final value and have some peak, and this peak is known as the overshoot. Okay, now this is the maximum peak, and we can calculate the time, how much time it take from 0 to TP. We can call it as peak time. So after that, the another important is the overshoot. Now overshoot is that this is the value you are reaching, see final, but your response is going up. Now if I take the measurement from the final value, how much it goes up is known as maximum overshoot. Okay, now this is another property. First is the rise time, then the maximum overshoot, then we have terminal time, then the last one is known as steady state time. So steady state time is the time when this curve enters 2% of the final value. So we mark this and we calculate this time, is known as steady state time. So let's see what is rise time, the time required for the waveform to go from 0.1 of the final value to 0.9 of the final. Peak time, the time required for to reach the first or maximum. Now percentage overshoot, the amount that the wave overshoots the steady state or the final value at the peak time. Now the last one was the settling time, that I told you that the time required for the transient damping oscillation to reach and settle within 2% of the final. Last one is the steady state error. Okay, so after steady state time, look here, so there's some error here, we call it as steady state error. Okay, now these are some properties of the dynamic system, and we normally use the second order to represent these properties. Now first task of today's lab is to actually we have a 4 different transfer function. Now we have to find the rise time, peak time, overshoot, and settling time. So this is the first one, and the question that is asked for you, that why G3 has no overshoot, so you have to answer this. So this answer lies actually with the properties of the response, that you do study critical damp, over damp, and under damp, so it is related to that one question, so you have to do yourself. Now task 2 is very interesting one. Actually, if you look here, there's a system, these two blocks you can reduce it by factorization. After that you have to multiply by k. Now the idea here is we have to design this C by R so that we can calculate or find out k. Now there are 3 questions that we need to answer. Find the value of k for which the overshoot is 10%, find the value for which the settling time is 5%, find the value of k for which the rise time is 1 second. So this is, you need to calculate 3 values. Now let's see how we can do this lab in MATLAB. So if I open the MATLAB, so what I did here, I just wrote a very simple code and named this file as lab4. And what we did on the first line is the clear all, means that you have to remove all the data if you have right till now. For example, clear all means that you have to remove the and clean the memory. After that you have close all. Close all is normally used to close the figures. Okay, then CLC means that you want to clear this command window. Now first task is, if you remember, lab 4 was to look at the transfer functions, 4 transfer functions. Okay, now if you do that, so there's very what you have to do, just define s. After that you have to put the value from G1, G2, G3 as I did here. Now I just wrote the 4 values. Okay, now next thing he is asked to look at the step response. So one method is to make a figure and just wrote the step response. So in that case you have to be very careful and identify the right system. Second one is to make a figure and make further, divide these figures into further subplots. So what I did here, I use the step response, legend, and grid on, and I just plot these figures. Okay, now this is the first one. If I plot all the transfer function, so it's very difficult to look at these ones. So there's another way out for this, and the way out is that instead of plotting all, so it's better to plot the individual. So look here, this is the response of the G1, this is the second response, this is the third one, and this is the fourth one. So you can do it. So if you look here, very simple coding, subplot 2 to 1 step, then 2 to 2, 2 to 3, 2 to 4. Now this is the first task that we did. The second task where we have to design the controller. So what I did actually, I just wrote the blocks there, and one block is 1 over s into s plus 2 into s plus 3, and second is s. So you need to feedback this, so I use the command feedback g11 comma g12. Now design, we have to do the design. So look here, what I did, I put k equal to 1, which was unknown, and kt equal to 0. So I just start a loop here, that is start from 1 to 100 with a step size of 0.1. So what I did here, I take this k and multiply with the open loop and feedback it to get the result. Now then I use Stepinfo command that you can find, that will give you the information about rise time over time. So for example, I am doing the second one, and in that case we say f is equal to rise s time, settling time, and settling time is within the range that is defined to us. That range is this one, and then I define kt, that is the one that I use to look at the overall system, and k is for these loops. So if I run it, so it will try to solve and give us the result. Okay, now the idea is to just look at and appreciate that we need some design methods so that we can do things further easy. Now so this is our lab. So after that you can look at the figure, look at your system that is selected by let me copy this. Let me write here figure. Before writing figure, it's better to, what I did here, I just copy this one and I just put step here. I'm just put the feedback here. So but I need T2 to do it. So this is the way we can look at the overall system. Now one thing you have to know that this is Stepinfo is a command based command from where you can calculate the rise time and settling time. But there's another way of calculating the rise time settling time, that is actually done using the figure. So let's see, let me remove this one because this is okay. This is actually I put mistakenly inside the loop, and that's why has shown a lot of figures. And okay, so I can try to stop it because I mistakenly put figure inside, so that took too much time to evaluate. So instead of putting inside, I need to put outside so that we can easily look this thing in detail. So this is your lab 4 actually. So you just need to do it, and the main idea here is you actually design a controller. So let me look at the results what we get. I think it's just want to know that. Okay, so these are the step response. That we are getting for all the figures here. Now okay, so if you have any question you can ask me.